Nothing but truth on AFR Talk.
Welcome back. Brain Durham's Nothing But Truth, probably on AFR Talk. So what did Secretary of State John Kerry have to say about the events in Egypt that left close to, and possibly more, than 150 people dead? Roll it. Cut number 8.
Violence is simply not a solution in Egypt or anywhere else. Violence will not create a roadmap for Egypt's future. Violence only impedes the transition to an inclusive civilian government, a government chosen in free and fair elections that governs democratically consistent with the goals of the Egyptian revolution. And violence and continued political polarization will only further tear the Egyptian economy apart and prevent it from growing, providing the jobs and the future that the people of Egypt want so badly.
Ryan Morrow, national security analyst at the Clarion Project, clarionproject.org, joins us. Ryan, tell me, what led up in a thumbnail sketch way to the events that have taken place in the last 24 to 48 hours that have yielded death and violence?
Basically, you had the Muslim Brotherhood supporters carrying out a sit-in, which was peaceful throughout Egypt, and the military finally said that they would clear it because they needed to bring stability to the country, that these protests were paralyzing, and so the police moved in today, and they launched tear gas. And part of the reason they did that is because the protesters were getting close to the Interior Ministry, and they were worried that it would be taken over. And so the police fired tear gas, and then, according to the reports on the ground, the Muslim Brotherhood fired the first shots, the first actual bullets. And then the army responded with probably disproportionate force. And so now what you may be seeing is a very low-level guerrilla war, because we do have reports of Christians being killed, of Islamist snipers taking shots at the security forces. But I do think that the United States is right to say that the Egyptian military may have reacted too much here, but we should include the Brotherhood in that statement and condemnation.
The Brotherhood, a peaceful sit-in during the time of the military putting the Brotherhood out, Morsi specifically, and now has the Brotherhood engaged in acts of violence, and have they done it not in the name of the Brotherhood, but to have plausible deniability, allowed things to happen, supported it behind the scenes, but didn't claim it?
Right. That's basically what's been happening here, particularly with the violence against the Christians, where you had the top Muslim Brotherhood authorities basically saying violence is justified and explicitly threatening the Christians, blaming the Christians, who are only 10% of the population, for the overthrow of Mohammed Morsi. And so they basically set the stage for this, knowing that people would take it upon themselves to engage in violence, and then they can meanwhile say, hey, we never made a call for jihad, we never authorized violence, but they know the result of their preaching. They know what they're doing.
What has the response been specifically to the persecution of Christians throughout this process, but now we are seeing it more pronounced as the violence grows from our government? Go ahead.
Right now, it's non-existent. Hopefully that'll change, because the media is starting to pick up more and more reports of churches being set on fire, and that's how the Muslim Brotherhood has responded to this. They can't take on the military, they can't take on the police because they have guns, so they're going after the defenseless Christians. And it's not just the Muslim Brotherhood, it's all of the Islamists are basically coming together right now against the Egyptian army and the Egyptian police force. But at the same time, they know that they cannot overpower the Egyptian security forces. So I think that there's still going to be a debate about whether they officially launch a jihad or they just try and become a major headache. And one of the things to not look forward to, but to expect, is the posting of dead children, because the Muslim Brotherhood, especially lately, have been using children as props. They actually had a pro-Morsi protest where they had the children march, declaring their willingness to die for their cause in burial shrouds.
So they're picking up on the Hamas tactics and the Hezbollah tactics that have been used against Israel.
Right. They understand
Yes.
the power of images. The Muslim Brotherhood is very slick. They're good at propaganda. And I wouldn't be surprised, in fact, I'm inclined to believe this, that the Muslim Brotherhood purposely set off this explosion of violence. That someone in there said, I'm going to take a couple shots at some police officers when they move in so that it results in a cycle of violence and then we can gain sympathy. This is the type of traps that the Muslim Brotherhood sets.
Okay. Well, certainly, if you're able to distinguish between the sides and the amount of violence and who's causing the violence, our president can do that because he has greater resources in the sense of intelligence and otherwise. Not insulting you and saying just you do extraordinary work, clarionproject.org, Ryan Morrow, National Security Analyst 4. But there's another side to this is certainly our president knows what's going on. Certainly John McCain and Lindsey Graham know what's going on and how the Muslim Brotherhood has behaved since they got into power and since their ouster. So why is it that there's this reluctance to condemn the Muslim Brotherhood completely and totally for their acts of violence?
Because the Obama administration and Republican senators that have also been duped by the Brotherhood believe that the Muslim Brotherhood as a whole is not a bad thing, that it has some bad apples in the mix, but overall it's not a bad thing. They believe that it's moderate, nonviolent, democratic, and it's better to include them in the democratic process than to kick them out and then push them more in the Al-Qaeda type direction of activism. So the entire linchpin of the Obama administration's strategy right now is to embrace the Muslim Brotherhood as a representative of mainstream Islam in order to marginalize and crush Al-Qaeda. But we're seeing that strategy go up in flames right now. And if you look at the polls of support for the United States, and especially for President Obama in Egypt right now, they just keep declining. I saw a poll by Zogby the other day that said, and this is so incredible, it's hard to believe, that said that the U.S. approval rating in Egypt now is at 3%, and the approval of President Obama is at 1%. This is the country where he gave that big Cairo speech.
Absolutely. So does this tell us that his foreign policy approach has been an absolute failure?
Yes, on Al-Qaeda it's worked, but overall the broad strategy has absolutely failed. We're not going to win over the Muslim Brotherhood to our side. We've alienated the opponents of the Muslim Brotherhood by not embracing them and, in fact, taking positions contrary to theirs. And it's going to grow more and more complex as a result. In Egypt right now, there's now 3 factions because the vice president for foreign affairs of Egypt, Mohammed el-Baradei, who's relatively pro-Western, resigned in reaction to the violence. You have 3 factions. You have the Islamists, you have the military and the police, and then the third faction, which are the more secular, reform-minded Muslims that stuck in between them.
Give me a size of those populations. Break down the percentage of the people that are in those 3 groups. Are they equally, or are there a greater amount in the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood camp overall?
The military is easily the most powerful institution and most popular. The last poll I saw showed that in the high 80s, I think even 90% of Egyptians still express confidence in the military. So they have this belief that the military has the right intentions and can be trusted, even though in the past they have used a heavy hand. So the outrage that you see in the United States is not rising to the emotion is not matched in Egypt. So the Egyptian military is the strongest, most powerful institution, and that includes a lot of support from secular moderates who may not agree with their tactics, but view them, the military, as the vanguard of their interests. The secular, more moderate elements of the population is harder to get a reading on. The most popular political party, and it's only got about 30%, is the Tamarod movement, which is the secular movement that had the Muslim Brotherhood eventually overthrown. But again, that's only 30%. And the Muslim Brotherhood is just absolutely tanking. We don't know where they're at, but day by day they're losing support. And the reason it's so hard to get a reading on what a moderate is in Egypt is because you see huge support for Sharia law, huge support for killing apostates, different elements of Sharia law that we would find repulsive here. But at the same time, you also see a great desire for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and anti-Muslim Brotherhood sentiment.
Is there a fear in those polls, if they do not answer in support of killing apostates and in implementing Sharia law, that the people with the power those with the guns and who do not respect human life, will end them? And does that impact the answers on these polls?
If it does, it'd be very minorly because those polls actually go back to when Mubarak was in power. Mm-hmm. So they were safe to say as they wanted then because he wouldn't come down on you for saying something in a secular, moderate fashion, even though he was a dictator, unless you were directly criticizing him. So I think that the polls are accurate. Hopefully, this nasty experience with the Muslim Brotherhood that the Egyptians have been through, who originally voted them into power, is causing the Islamist ideology and advocacy for Sharia law to recede a bit. But it's hard to tell how much because there's just no information to go by.
So the realities of Sharia law, once known, are not very popular, and certainly the group that is advocating those and oppressing those with those laws becomes the enemy. Here's the question. You go into President Obama and you say, Mr. President, you've got to do three things right now, or one thing right now. What do you say?
I would say modify your statements to condemn the Muslim Brotherhood and make sure that you recognize that they have responsibility for this violence. Condemn any type of overreaction by the security forces. You have to do that. We have to stick to our principles. But don't leave the Muslim Brotherhood out of the equation because right now we're reinforcing this very damaging image of the United States as being pro-Islamist in Egypt. And I remember how everyone said that President Obama would repair our relationships with the Muslim world, that the approval rating of the United States would go sky high because he spoke their language and understood them. And here we have in Egypt a much more anti-American Egypt now than it was even under President Bush.
Final question. Christians, would you address the Christian persecution specifically?
Oh, yes. We absolutely have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Tell me, Obsession, the movie, we can learn more about what you know and you teach us when you come on, Radical Islam and the movie Obsession. I have the link up to get that. People go to, how can they get that movie, Ryan?
Well, you can get it for free. Just go to getobsession.com and pay for shipping. Use the coupon code of Crane. So your magic word is Crane. It's getobsession.com, and that DVD is yours.
And I will put the link up on the Facebook, getobsession.com. All you do is pay for the shipping, and it's Crane. Thank you, Ryan Morrow. Great to be with you.
Thanks, Crane.
Always. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. AFR Talk. Race. Opposition to President Obama. That's the question. AFR Talk. Your call's next.